Next, I want to turn to the physical geography of the mostly Russia. We'll discuss Central Asia separately, but concentrating on Russia, I want to focus a little bit on cold climates, because cold climates dominate this realm, particularly in Russia. And if you look at this map here, this shows a lot of different climate categories. In the South and Central Asia are B climates, which are generally grasslands and deserts. But up here in Russia, it's dominated by two separate types of climates. The D climates. D climates are very cold in the winter. And then up here along the margins and in Siberia, E climates, which are tundra or extremely cold climates. So first I want to back up a bit and talk about climates in Europe. And one thing that we noted is, particularly in Western Europe, that Europe gets a lot of ocean influence from the North Atlantic drift and winds that come in from over the ocean that makes the climate of Europe quite moderate given its latitude. So Europe is dominated by sea climates. Sea climates here shown in Western Europe and other parts of the world are not so cold in the wintertime. They get chilly, but they're not as completely frozen as you might find in Siberia or places like that. There are environments that look a little more like this. They do have 4 seasons of winter, but the winters are not as severe and snow-covered as they might be in other places of the world. And they're generally wet places as well. Now, Russia, on the other hand, is dominated by D climates and a little bit of E as well, which are the coldest of the cold. And the effect of being far from the ocean influence, or in a region, a big land area that doesn't have as much influence from the ocean, where the temperatures tend to go to extremes, especially extremely cold given the latitude of Russia. There's a similar climate in Canada where we have the boreal forest and even the northern part of the US in places like Chicago. But these D climates dominate the area of Russia. So if you remember from our lecture where we talked about climate and position within a landmass was one of those factors, we talked about the difference in the climates of San Francisco and Wichita. San Francisco not having much difference between its winter and summer temperatures, where Wichita has much more extreme differences. That's because Wichita would have what we call a continental climate, meaning it's farther from the ocean influence and has much greater extremes, whereas San Francisco is more influenced by the ocean and has fewer extremes. It's what we call a marine climate. D climates, which are continental, are extremely cold or severely cold. And the environments physically tend to be dominated by cold and wet forests, like the boreal forests in Canada. Another climate that we have at the margins of Russia are the extremely cold climates called the E, or the polar climates. And these are in places like Antarctica, in Greenland, and also along the margins of Russia. And these are always cold, even in the summertime. So these are some pictures of some E climates. I want to highlight this one in the corner here, where this is an environment called tundra. And if you notice, one type of vegetation that is noticeably absent from tundra are trees, because these climates are so cold in the summer that trees don't have a chance to grow. Trees require a certain number of days above a given temperature, about 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Without enough of those days, called degree days or warming days, it's not a hospitable environment for trees to grow. So tundra tends to be treeless because of its cold, because of the extreme cold. And in some cases, E climates can include places like this, where it's just completely covered in ice. They're also found in high mountain areas. So at the tops of high mountain chains, you can find environments that are extremely cold like this as well. So these are called climagraphs. These are ways of describing climate, and we use them in physical geography classes when we learn about climate. And what they are charts showing precipitation on the bottom. We're not going to focus on that so much right now, but it's average monthly precipitation for January, February, and so on through the month. But the red line here, that's what I want to focus on. That is the average temperature throughout the year. And the temperature is over on this side in Fahrenheit, but mostly I want us to look at the pattern. So this is a sea climate in the southwestern US, and you'll notice that there's not as much difference here between the winter and the summer temperature as there is over here on the right in a D climate. The thing that characterizes the D climate are the deep cold temperatures that are experienced in the winter. And that's why we call these severe or continental. Going from the D climates, which are cold winter climates, to the E climates, that the E climates also are cold in the winter, but they're even cold in the summertime. Although they do get warmer, they don't reach a critical temperature about here, 50 degrees Fahrenheit, which is required for trees to grow. So E climates include what's called tundra or treeless areas, whereas the D climates are covered in vast forests like the boreal forest in Canada, and one we're going to learn about today called the taiga in Russia. It's very similar to Canada's boreal forest. Okay, so just to recap, continental climates are far from the ocean and they have extremely cold winters, and that's what dominates the climate of Russia. There's two types of environments in these cold areas. One is the taiga. The taiga is the largest forest zone on Earth, and it covers much of Russia, quite similar to the boreal forest in Canada. The taiga experiences cold winters but warm summers, and because of the warm summers, that allows this vast forest of trees to grow. In the coldest part of Russia, a colder climate called tundra exists, and tundra are the coldest climates. In fact, they're so cold, there's no trees. Trees can't grow because of the extreme cold. And one thing that characterizes tundra, and a little bit in the taiga, is a phenomenon called permafrost. And permafrost is where the soil in the ground is frozen either for all of the year or much of the year. So permafrost means frozen soil. So this is from a different textbook, but it's helpful I labeled it here just to highlight the geography of this. At the northern extremes and in the extremes of Siberia in purple here, this is where you have the tundra environments, those treeless cold environments. In green here, this is where you have the taiga. The taiga are the massive forests that extend across most of Russia. Now, as we go further south towards Central Asia, it starts to get drier because you're headed towards the Middle East down here, which is a dry environment. So initially, you have a grassland zone called the steppe. This is the Russian steppe. It's a grassland that runs skirts right along the south of Russia. That extends into Central Asia here, which is mostly desert. So places like Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan are, for the large part, desert environments. So here's a picture of the taiga, again, the Earth's largest continuous forest area. Biome means like a big ecosystem that covers a large area. Here's a photo of a tundra environment. Again, note the lack of trees. And this is a figure that illustrates permafrost, where here, and this is more of a illustration of a tundra environment, you have more what's called continuous permafrost, meaning that it covers a large area and covers quite a bit of it. Here in the taiga, it starts to break up and be discontinuous, meaning that there are patches of permafrost, but the area isn't completely covered in permafrost. And one thing related to human geography, that in permafrost areas, careful consideration has to be taken in how you build things, because the permafrost, while frozen, is fairly stable, but if you warm it up, it can become unstable. So structures have to be built above the ground in a special way as to not melt the permafrost, causing it to become a muddy mess.